your thoughts on the passing of Dan Rooney, Rod?
Well, yeah, it's very sad for not only Steeler Nation, but just the Rooney family. You know how instrumental he was as a family man. His wife and his kids. He did everything for them. And, we all are going to pass away sooner or later, but the influence that he had on the city of Pittsburgh, and not only that, you just got to think about, an NFL owner has influence on being named the ambassador to Ireland from Barack Obama in 2009. That's how he was thought of around the U.S. I think he had a tremendous impact. You were just talking about the Rooney Rule, and that's something that he just wanted people to look out. He wanted people to look out of the box for leaders and people of influence. He wanted people to get away from the norm, and he was willing to go on the line for that. He did that when he hired a very unknown Mike Tomlin as their head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. People really didn't know who he was. He did the same thing when he hired Bill Cowher. People really didn't know who Bill Cowher was, but they do now. And I think as a leader for the Steeler Nation and for the city and that organization, there will never be another Dan Rooney.
And it's interesting. I mentioned at the top of the show too, Rod, is here's a guy who wanted to make sure that hiring practices in the league were on the up and up and were diverse. And the guy who did it is a guy who never fired a coach or had to hire anybody because of his style of management. How did that permeate a locker room, knowing that your coach wasn't going anywhere, Rod?
Well, I think leadership does permeate any facility around the globe. It doesn't matter what type of team you're putting together, the NFL team or a corporate 500 team. If there's some type of animosity and things going on in the higher-ups, that will trickle down to everybody else. And for Dan Rooney, you never had those issues, because he was always going to take care of his guys. When I first got there in 1987, the chief was still alive, his dad, and he reminds me so much of him because the chief, after practice, would come in the locker room with his big old cigarette and his big glasses and talk to every single player and ask them how they're doing and how's their family. And then Dan Rooney had that same philosophy. He was just such a family man, and he loved all his players. He would come in the locker room and ask them about their family and their kids and how everything's going. And that permeated to wanting to do well.
All the local television stations broke into their coverage to report on the passing of Dan Rooney. Flags across the state of Pennsylvania are at half staff right now, Rod. Can you give voice to what Dan Rooney meant to the Keystone State and obviously Western Pennsylvania, which has such a lush history for the sport of football?
Well, I think really just about his life and the way he lived it. There's no person that was so much more for family and community than Dan Rooney. And everything he did for the city, for the state, for his family, and you want people like that. And I think, and I said it, excuse me, a little while ago, that's why Barack Obama put him as the ambassador to Ireland in 2009, because he had an influence on people, a very good influence on people, and he wanted that to rub off on him representing the United States to the country of Ireland. And that's a big honor if you really think about it. And that's just the impact that he had on our community, not just in the National Football League, but as a whole, because he had much respect throughout the National Football League, and things that he said and his viewpoints and his stances on certain items had a big impact on where the NFL went and where they're at right now.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.